G'day guys, Jace here again. Okay, in the park today with a more unusual of my planes. Now there's a lot of wind, so I'm not sure how the sound is going to be on this video, and I'm not sure how this plane is really going to fly, but it should be okay. It should fly well enough for me to do this video. Now the reason why I'm going to talk this time when I do the video on the Sea Fury, because the last video I didn't talk, I just flew it. And before I get started in this, I just want to say that I do actually enjoy flying this plane. It's actually quite a nice little park flyer. But what I want to say about it is, if you're planning to buy this plane, and I'm not sure why you would, because it's not really a mainstream model, the Hawker Sea Fury. I like it because it's Hawker, but it's not really a mainstream model. And the only reason that you would really buy this is if you've got one from before and it's crashed and you've got all the spare parts. Because basically this plane isn't worth the money that it costs to put it together. If you had to buy all the electrics, because this is literally just comes as an airframe with the prop and that's it. It doesn't come with a motor, it doesn't come with servos, it doesn't come with receiver, battery, any cabling or anything. I've worked out if you had to buy the whole lot from scratch, it would cost you over $500. I ended up spending $360 on this, and that was because even though I assumed I had all the stuff, the receiver, ESC, motor, everything, it did in fact require 6 specific E-flite servos, 4 for just flight, 6 if you wanted the retracts, mechanical retracts. And so I bought them, and then it led on to more expense. I had to buy a servo reverser. I bought the original motor. I was always planning to buy the original motor, but from a kit that's basically $112 in the shops, you end up having to spend $360 before you have to buy a receiver and an ESC, because I already had them. And I mean, let's face it, that model right there, P47, that was $275 bind and fly. Came with a battery, came with everything done, all the servos in, the motor, ESC, the lot, and I paid another $100 for the retractable undercarriage, and I've got flaps on this as well. And all up this cost me about $350. So $350 for that model there, that came with everything, as opposed to $360 for this one. But if I didn't have had the spare parts, that would have been over $500, and it's just not worth it. It's a lovely little park flyer, but it's not worth it. And I had other issues as well. You might see that it's got an aluminium spinner on the front instead of the little plastic one. That's because that's the genuine E-flite propeller, and it's cut for clockwise rotation, but the prop was actually cut for anti-clockwise, so I had to put that aluminium one on, so that again was more expensive. Anyway, that's enough of the talking about it from that point of view. I'm just going to get it in the air and do a bit of a fly with it and talk through the flight. Very windy today, as I said, so you have to bear with me on the flight. Undercarriage up and in the air. Now, like I said, it's not a bad little park flyer. It does fly quite nicely. It's not over fast, it's not overpowered. It's basically about right for scaled flight. It's quite aerobatic, don't get me wrong there. You know, it's not the most spectacular. I certainly wouldn't put it in the same bracket as a Park Zone Mustang, but if you guys are familiar with the Park Zone Wildcat, then I'd say it was along the lines of that. Probably a little bit faster, probably a little bit better performance, but it's not like a thrill machine, you know. It's not something that's really going to thrill you. Now, the reason why I'm going to tell you about the things I did with this model is because I don't know how many people of you out there are looking to buy this thinking it might be a cheap model to get into. But it's not actually as straightforward to put it together as you would think either. On the website, if you have a look on the eFlite website, it says it takes about 3 to 5 hours to assemble. Well, it took me nearly 12 hours to assemble. The reason for that is the ailerons and the elevator and the rudder, they don't have little hinges. They're not pre-hinged and pre-cut. You have to cut them off the wing and then re-hinge them, and it's really complicated. It's really finicky to do, and you know, I had to use a scalpel, had to use these little plastic tabs and create flaps and create little hinges, and it took ages. It took me nearly 5 hours just to do that part of it, and then putting the eFlite servos in, that again was another issue and another hassle, because they've got little plastic cutouts, and it's hard to get the retracts to work independently to each other. If you flick the switch, one goes up and one goes down, and I tried using mixing, putting one retract into the aux servo and then mixing it. The thing is, it never really worked. One would extend all the way, one wouldn't extend enough, and I had to extend servo length, and in the end I just got fed up and I bought a servo reverser. So the last point is, I don't really know what eFlite were trying to do with this model. I don't know what their target customer is. I know there's a few people out there that have bought it, because there's quite a few YouTube videos. For me personally, I don't really understand it. It's $112, which seems like you know, not that much money to buy, but the amount of work and the amount of money, if you think that a binding fly or Kaholica, which is a size 25 flyer, with the retracts ready to go, with a battery, with a charger, with a receiver, with everything, would cost you less than it would cost to put this up and running. It doesn't seem to make any sense. And like I said, it's not really a thrill seeker. It's not really you know, the kind of model that really keeps you guessing. It's a very stable platform, I'll give it that. I mean, it's very windy today, and this thing is flying, you know, well enough to handle the wind. And like I said, I do enjoy flying it. It is enjoyable to fly. It's just not anything special to fly, and I think for the cost, it should be more than that. Either that, or it should be easier to assemble, or it should have more assembly in it. I mean, $112. If you think any Park Zone fuselage kit for any of their models is actually about $70, and I have a Habu. I bought a Habu fuselage kit, a Habu 2 fuselage kit, in actual fact, so I can put all the components in. That only cost $80, and this was $112, and you know, didn't come with anything. The Habu fuselage kit actually came with all the not the servos or anything, but actually came with wiring built into it. So you know, I just don't really understand what eFlite were trying to do with it. If this dog urinates on my plane, I'll kick it in the face. So yeah, like I said, not really sure what eFlite are trying to do to target it. And eFlite and Park Zone, I mean, they make some very good models. Most of my models are Park Zone and eFlite, and I enjoy flying them all. And like I say, I enjoy flying this one, but it's just confusing as to what demographic they're chasing. I'll put another battery in it and fly it again. Need to sort that out. So I'll run through the costs. So $112 for the plane itself, and then 6 servos cost $150. I mean, that's pretty expensive for 6 tiny little servos. So $150 for that. So that puts you up to $262. And then if you didn't have other stuff, like I said, if you were just doing this from scratch, you have to buy the 30 amp, at least 30 amp eFlite ESC. That's another $60. So that puts you from $262 to $322. And then you have to buy the motor, which is another $60, so that's $382. And then you have to buy the receiver, which is again another $60. So what are we up to now? 382, 422 dollars for the receiver. And then a battery. A battery is going to cost you about, if you don't buy a cheap crappy Turnigy or something like I'm using at the moment, if you buy like a Dual Sky or Parkzone, it's going to cost you about $30, $30 to $40. So you know, you're up to $100 now and then. And then all your leads, because you'll need extension leads. You know, so I worked out that it's about $520 from scratch, and you're going to need about at least 12 hours. So, you know, guys, it's for you to decide. It's for you to reckon if you want to spend that kind of time and that kind of money on a model like this. Again, I don't think it's worth it. I had some issues with eFlite when I mentioned the prop spinner being cut the wrong way. Their recommendation was to buy a propeller that was cut the other direction. But then I don't know how many of you out there are aware, but these Parkzone and eFlite planes are designed with down torque for the propellers, which stops them from tipping left when they take off. So that wouldn't really work, because if I put a prop on spinning the other way, that would negate all of that prop torque, downward prop thrust. So, you know, in the end I got them to give me that aluminium spinner, but then that caused problems because that was about 10 times the weight of the plastic one. So I ended up with a CG issues, which I had to correct with weights. So as you can see, it's not something that I would ever consider doing again. I did it at first because I thought I had micro servos and everything would be cheap, but it wasn't. But anyway, I'll fly it again, and you'll be able to see that it is, you know, just like the previous flight, although it's windy, it is actually quite a, you know, enjoyable little plane to fly. Oh yeah, and in case you're wondering, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've taken off the little tail wheel, the little bogey wheel at the back. The reason for that is because it was way oversized for its scale, and when it was flying with the undercarriage up, it had this huge little tail wheel at the back, and it just looked awful. I hated it, so I took it off. It doesn't need it. A little plastic skid that's in there to attach the wheel to is enough for steering the plane. It doesn't hold it back or anything. It doesn't affect it when it's landing. So I just took it off. So this is about my 6th flight today of this Sea Fury. I mean, flying issues, I haven't really had too many. The first time I flew it was very, very unbalanced, and I couldn't work out what that was, and that in the end turned out to be the aluminium spinner. There's one video I've got on my YouTube thread that it's called Hawker Sea Fury, very unbalanced, and that flight almost stopped me from flying the plane ever again. It was only when I was sitting at home one night and watching a documentary about airplanes that they actually were talking about centre of gravities on planes and how they affect the aircraft when flying upside down, how aircraft are built unstable, and it dawned on me that the reason why this was behaving the way it was all because of that aluminium spinner that eFlite had given to me to replace the plastic one that wasn't cut right. But now all the balance issues are sorted out, and I've secured all the control surfaces, because they were a pain. Those little plastic tabs they give you to make the hinges with really not reliable. In the end I used stronger plastic. I found a packet that something had come in, I don't know, it might have been the spinner actually, the aluminium spinner, but I cut that up and used that plastic, and it's been a lot stronger, and there's no drift now in the control surfaces. It's quite a stable little plane now, and it is relaxing and enjoyable to fly. If that's your genre for flying, to buy a nice scaled aeroplane that looks nice scaled and fly it in a scaled way, and fly it in a relaxing way, instead of doing like complicated fast reaction aerobatics. If it's just to fly something nice and smooth and relaxed, then this is nice for that. It is nice, and it'll fly in a relatively small park. This is quite a small park here, and you know, I don't have a lot of airspace to play with, but this little plane is sort of designed for it. In the van I do actually have the new Flite Zero, but I'm having some C of G issues with that as well. That's straight out of the box, and that had an issue as well. That's meant to have a little rubber band that connects the wing to the fuselage, and that wasn't supplied in the box, so I had to glue mine on. I don't really like gluing wings to fuselage because I like to be able to take them off at some point if I need to, but it's more important that the aircraft is structurally stable, so that's why I've glued it. But that's got C of G issues as well. It's very twitchy on the elevator, so I'm in the process of experimenting with dual rate and exponential and all sorts of mixtures to try and get that balance right, and I might in the end, like with this one, end up having to put some weights in the back and make it a little less sensitive on the nose. But that again is a great little plane for a park this size. The little minis and the micros and these 400 scale park flyers, they're perfect for this little park. There's a bigger park around the corner from me, and I take the bigger planes there, like my FMS Spitfire and my E-Flite Hurricane, my Durafly Mustang. That's the timer going off there, so I'll bring it into land. But this little park is a bit closer to me. It's got less people in it at most times, so this is the one I prefer to use. And this little plane is just perfect for the size of it, along with the P-47 Thunderbolt I've got here. That might be a little bit big for it, but it doesn't matter. I can still fly within the confines. But the P-51 Mustang, the gunfighter that Park Zone make, that's perfect for this size of park. And yeah, that's what these things are great for. And that's why I had an interest in this model in the first place. I'm just going to check if the video is still recording, because if it is, I might put the Thunderbolt into the air and do a video with that. I'm just going to check. Yeah, we are still recording, so that's good. So yeah, I think I'll just do a quick video of the P-47 Thunderbolt, and I can do some talking about that model. So look, Flite Sea Fury, not worth it from the point of view of cost. If you're looking for a cheap little park flyer and you think, oh yes, I've got all the parts, this will be great, you really just be careful, because you're going to be up for some hidden costs that you weren't planning on if you don't sort of watch what you're going to have to buy for it. But once it's up and running, if you can do it cheaply enough, if you do have spare parts, if you've had one of these before and you know, you just want to transfer your parts over to the newer model made out of Z foam instead of EPO foam, then you know it's going to be a winner for you. But just be careful, because it can be a costly little affair.